Hi, I'm Nicole from FamilyLocket.com, and I'm excited today to talk about part 4 of Finding Names for the Temple, which is doing a research project. In the previous steps, you have found a relative who you have a research question about. So then you created an objective and you started a research plan and you started trying to find records about them. So in this video, I'm going to talk about two important things. When you find a record, how do you know if it matches your relative? And how do you know if the record is reliable? These two questions are very important as you research. So how do you know if a record matches your relative? You review what you already know in Family Tree. Then you go search for a record. Then you compare the information you find on the record to the information in Family Tree. And you can do this really easily with a tool in Family Search called the source linker. So if it doesn't match up, just remember you can wait until you know more until you attach it. And then you might find out that you shouldn't attach it because it doesn't match. So be careful when you're attaching, but if it matches up correctly and all the unique identifiers are a match, like the birth date in place and the death date in place, and they all match or are within reason, go ahead and attach it. And I'm going to show you how to do that in the next video. All right, using my research plan and log, I'm going to see if I can find the 1861 England census for Pierce Sumter Bradley and his family. My goal is to find all of his children. And in Family Search, some of his children are listed, but I want to make sure I find all of them. What if there's more than 5? So some of the census records that are attached are the 1841, 51, and 71, 81, and 91, but not 61. So in my research plan, I've put that I'm going to search the 1861 England census, and I'm looking for Pierce, Bradley, and Jane, and I'm thinking it could either be in Swine's Head or maybe Spittlegate, since that's where they were in 1871. And in 1851 they were in New Stratton, so I'm not sure where they will be in 1861, but first we'll start with Swine's Head and go from there. That's my guess. And so let's see, I chose this record collection here to search. This is the Family Search record collection for the 1861 England and Wales census. You can see that I sometimes look in Ancestry. If I can't find a family in one index, then you can check the other index. If you can't find it in Ancestry, check Family Search. This time I'm going to try Family Search. So I'm going to type in Pierce Sumter Bradley, male, residence place. I think it's going to be in Swine's Head, Lincolnshire, and birth. I know he was born in Swine's Head, Lincolnshire, from about 1820 to 1824, possibly. Let's see. He was christened in 1821, so that gives me a good enough range. I could widen it, maybe 1818 to 1824. And I'm not sure if he's going to be living in Swine's Head. Why don't we just remove that and put Lincolnshire only? That's a larger place to search. And then we know his spouse's name is going to be Jane. And let's go ahead and search. No records are found. Now what? Why don't we try removing some information? So we can remove Lincolnshire, possibly. See if we get more. No records found. Maybe his name was indexed incorrectly. Let's try removing his first name and adding a more specific guess for where he lived. So in 1851, he lived in New Stratton. So let's try that. Maybe he's still there. Let's just put the county, Durham. No records. Let's try looking back in Lincolnshire. Since he was back in Lincolnshire in 1871, he was in Spittlegate in 1871. So let's see if he's living there. Oh, here we go. Pearl Bradley and spouse Jane Bradley. Could that be my Pierce Bradley? So now we need to decide if this record matches what I already know. So we're going to do that by clicking on the record. and looking at all the information and then comparing it with what we know. So we know this person's name was Pearl Bradley. Wait, was that right? Let's look at the image and see what the name really says, because Pearl Bradley doesn't sound like a man's name. Zooming in, we see it actually says Pierce Bradley. And born in Sutterton. And what do we know about Pierce? He was born in Swineshead. But in the 1841 census, Lincolnshire. In the 1851 census, what does it say for his birthplace? Shutterton. So the birthplace could be Shutterton or Sutterton. Possibly he was born in Sutterton and then christened in Swineshead, because it says his christening was in Swineshead. So what we need to do now at this point, since we think it's a match, we need to compare it more in the source linker by clicking Attach to Family Tree. The source linker will put everything from the record on the left and what we already know from Family Tree on the right. So we're going to compare Pierce Bradley. Okay, so Pierce Bradley name, we know this actually reads Pierce on the actual image, so that's a match. Male, that's a match. Birth. The census gives an estimate of 1824 for his birth, and we already know that he was born 7 October 1821. And we have Swineshead, but some other records say that he could have been born in Shutterton. Let's see how close are those two places on the map. The England Jurisdictions of 1851 is a helpful map that Family Search has put out. You can put in a place and see where it is. So let's look at the parish of Shutterton. There is no Shutterton. What about Sutterton? Okay, Sutterton is here in Lincolnshire. Let's zoom in and see the close by parishes. Here's Sutterton, here's Wigtoft, Gosberton, Surfleet. Where's Swineshead? Oh, there's Swineshead. So he was either born in Sutterton or Swineshead, but look how close they are. It's possible he was born in Swineshead, born in Sutterton, and christened in Swineshead. If there was family in Swineshead, who knows? So back to this. Residence. In 1861, this record says that he resided in Spittlegate. In 1871, he resided in Spittlegate, so this looks like it could be a match. Looks like he lived in Spittlegate until the rest of his life. What about wife? So we know his wife's name is Mary Jane Baldock, and this woman's name is Jane Bradley. So is this a match? Well, yes, Jane and Jane is a match, and Bradley is her married name, so Mary Jane Baldock is Mary Jane Baldock Bradley, and maybe she wasn't going by Mary Jane, maybe she just went by Jane, so this could be a match. And let's see her birth date. Her birth date is given as 1826 in Ruskington, Lincolnshire, and what we already know about her is that she was born in 1824 in Ruskington, Lincolnshire. So this wife looks like a match. So I'm going to go ahead and conclude that this record on the 1861 census is a match for Pierce Bradley and Jane. And let's just check the children. Okay, they have one child, and it matches here. Mary Jane Bradley matches with this. But it looks like there should be more children. So let's consult the image one more time and see if there are more children that are not indexed. They're at the bottom of the page. So there's no space for any more children to be recorded. Let's go to the next image in the census and see if there's more children here. All right, so here we have Walter B. Bradley, and he's the son. So this was not indexed correctly. The whole family should appear on the indexed record. But here we only have the first three in the family. So now we can see that there's a whole bunch of other children here. Walter B., Eliza A., Joseph P., Henry, Emma, and William P. And I didn't have all those children. I only had down to Catherine. So Walter B., yes, that's a match. Eliza A., yes, that's a match. What about Frederick? Is Frederick here? No, I don't see Frederick, but he wasn't born until 1863, and Catherine wasn't born until 1867. So we have Mary Jane, Walter B., and Eliza A. Those two are there, and Mary Jane's on the other page. And now we have Joseph, Henry, Emma, and William to add to the family that aren't here yet. So we found some new people to add. This is wonderful. We're going to have to add them later because they're not appearing here in the source linker. So we'll come back to that and we'll add them. All right, so we're going to finish up attaching this record now that we've determined that it's a match. So we're going to click add to the residence. We want to add this residence to our list of where he lived. And we'll put that this census shows Pierce Bradley's residence in 1861 and shows the names of how many children? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then Mary Jane on the other page, 7 children. And the names of 7 children. Attach. And then let's attach it to Jane. Her residence is the same. Pierce and Jane Bradley's residence, and shows the names of 7 children. Attach. Great, and now we can compare one more time and add this to the daughter Mary Jane. Mary Jane living with her parents in Spittlegate. Attach. And that is how you determine if a record matches your relative. Now I'll talk about the reliability of records. There's 3 things you need to look at. The most reliable records will be original sources that were created at the time of the event, or the first source about that event, and primary information, which means that the person who reported the information was an eyewitness, and direct evidence, which means the information answers your research question directly. Let's go over this in more detail. Okay, on a source, there are 3 different kinds of sources. Original, which is the first record created of an event. There's a derivative source, which is an index or transcription or something created from the original record. And there's authored sources or authored narratives. And this is where the author combines original and derivative records to make their own narrative or their own source, which is authored. Here's an example of an original record. This is a census record. It was the first record created of this residence or event. Here's an example of a derivative. This is an index to the wills in England. So you can see it's a listing of the people who have wills that was created from the original wills. So it's a derivative. So there's not as much information on here as there would be on the original record. So if you only use this derivative, you're missing out on some of the information that you can receive by looking at the original will. So you can see how original records are better than derivative records. And lastly, here's an example of an authored narrative. And if the authored narrative includes good source citations and uses original records, then it can be a very high quality source. But you would still want to check the original record that the author references to make sure that you agree with his or her conclusions. Moving on to information. On every record in a source, there are pieces of information. And some of the information was given by one informant, some was given by another. Sometimes an entire record is created by one informant. You have to kind of pick it apart and figure out who's telling the information. And sometimes you might not know, and sometimes you might need to learn more about the source in order to figure it out. But there are 3 kinds of information. Primary means that the informant was an eyewitness to the event. So that means they saw the marriage and then they wrote it down. Or they saw the birth and then they talked about it later, like the mother giving the age of her child. Secondary is that the informant was not an eyewitness. They received the information from someone else and they're passing it on. And it's kind of like the game of telephone where the information gets a little changed every time. And then undetermined is when you don't know the informant or the record doesn't state who the informant was, like on a census record, when all the family members' names and ages and place of birth are listed, but the census taker doesn't tell you who gave them that information. It could have been the head of household, it could have been the mother, it could have been the neighbor, but the informant is usually undetermined. There are some censuses later where the informant is given, like in, I believe, the 1911 British Census and the 1940 United States Census. You can tell who the informant is because it says who the informant is on it. Here is an example of primary information. So we have a marriage record in a parish registry, and it's recorded by Joseph Holmes, vicar. And he is the one who married these two. And he solemnized the marriage at the parish church in the parish of Swineshead in the county of Lincoln. And he made this record by writing down this information about the couple and their age and their condition. And then this marriage was solemnized between us. Pierce Bradley and Jane Baldock signed the record, so they witnessed that they were there also. And these two witnesses were also present. So the informant for this record is Joseph. He was the informant for the marriage date. So the marriage date and the people who were married, he is a primary informant because he witnessed the marriage. Now the other information here is not primary information because the father's name and surname, that is secondary information. Why? Here's why. Pierce Bradley on his birth certificate is listed as illegitimate, and only his mother's name is listed, Mary Bradley. So when I saw this and saw that his father's name was listed as Thomas Bradley, I had a question because I thought his mother was a single mom with an illegitimate child. And you'll see over here that the vicar underlined Bradley and replaced it with Sumter and then signed it with his initials, J.H. So the vicar must have assumed that Thomas's last name was Bradley because that's what Pierce's last name was. But Pierce must have corrected him and let him know, no, actually my father's name is Pierce Sumter. So in this case, Joseph Holmes, the vicar, is a secondary informant for the father of Pierce Bradley. He didn't know Pierce Bradley's father. He asked Pierce, and Pierce may have heard from his mom, who told him your father's name is Pierce Sumter. So that information was passed down to the vicar, and that was fixed here. So you can see how each part of a record might have different types of information. The marriage date and the people who are married and the place, that's all primary information because Joseph Holmes, the vicar, was an eyewitness. But the father's name, that's secondary because Joseph Holmes is not an eyewitness to Pierce Bradley's father. So we talked about secondary. This name here, Thomas Bradley, is secondary information because it was provided by someone who was not an eyewitness to that event, Joseph Holmes, the vicar. Undetermined. When you're looking at a census record, unless it's one of the later censuses that I mentioned, 1940 in the United States and 1911 in England, you don't know who the informant is because the census taker asked somebody in the neighborhood or the head of household or the wife all the names of the household and they gave it to him, but we don't know who it was. We can only guess that maybe it was the head of household. Now we are on evidence. There's three kinds of evidence. Direct evidence answers the research question directly. Indirect evidence is when you have some clues here and some there that may need to be combined to give you the answer to your research question. And negative is the absence of information which answers the research question. Let's see some examples. Direct. What are Pierce's children's names? If that is my research question, then this census record answers that directly because it gives the name of his daughter, Mary Jane Bradley. So that's direct evidence that his daughter's name is Mary Jane. And see how it says daughter here? That's direct evidence that she's the daughter to Pierce. All right, if the question is what are Pierce's children's names, then Pierce's marriage record is indirect evidence. We know that he did get married to a woman named Jane, but we don't know what the children's names are. We know that Jane's maiden name is Baldock. So later on, when we find a christening record that is for Walter Baldock Bradley with a father named Pierce and a mother named Jane, then we can use that combined with this to come to an answer, which is that Pierce's child's name is Walter Baldock Bradley. So combining those two clues, that's indirect evidence. And now negative evidence. What if I do a search in England and Wales Christening Index and search for children of Pierce Bradley by putting his name into the father field and nothing comes up? It's negative. Nothing is there. That's negative evidence that he had children who were born in Spitalgate. So I'd have to look in another place. So I received negative evidence that none of his children were christened in Spitalgate, or he didn't have any children christened, or he didn't have any children. So that's negative evidence. All right, here is my research log, and I want to decide if all of the sources that I found are accurate and reliable before I add them to the Family Search family tree. A record is most reliable if it is the original record, not an index or transcription, if the information is given by a primary informant, not secondary, or otherwise known as an eyewitness, and the evidence answers your research question directly. Thanks for watching. And if you want to read about all of the steps in finding names for the temple, you can purchase my book at Amazon.com. It's called Find Names for the Temple, a step-by-step method for success. You can also read more at our website, FamilyLocket.com, where my mother and I, who is an accredited genealogist, write helpful how-to articles about doing family history. Good luck, you can do it.